Hello, James Moffitt here. Please go to parentingadultchildren.org website and sign up for a free membership and leave a review for this episode. If you have any requests for future topics, send me an email at talkpac@proton.me. That's talkpac@proton.me. Please share this podcast with your friends and family. Now for today's guest interview.
Welcome to the podcast ABCs of Parenting Adult Children. Please join us as we discuss parenting adult children and the unique struggles that it comes along with.
Hello and welcome to ABC's of Parenting Adult Children podcast. My name is James Moffitt and I'll be your host. Today we have a guest speaker. His name's Brady Daniel. Brady, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much, James.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for being here. Do me a favor and introduce yourself to the listening audience.
Absolutely. So I am a clinician. I've been practicing for 19 years, going on to 20. And I have the privilege of getting to sit across individuals and helping them with whether it's marriages, whether it's parenting, families, whatever it may be. And I have the honor of getting to walk alongside of individuals. I've been married for almost 20 years, have 3 kiddos, and love what I get to do each and every day.
Wonderful. That's awesome. So this episode could explore how a mind-body approach and understanding of emotional and spiritual healing can provide parents of adult children with tools to foster better relationships, communicate effectively, and address anxiety and anger within family dynamics. So Brady, tell us a little bit about your family and your parenting.
Absolutely. So I've got 3 kiddos. I got a 14-year-old, I've got a 12-year-old, and I've got a 9-year-old. And I always like to tell people that they're my mentors. Why? Because I'm still learning. I tell people all the time that I sit across from them. This isn't being called into the principal's office, even though it may seem that way. But the idea that we're all on a big journey trying to learn this together. A lot of my journey of parenting is learning, how do I become a better dad? What is it that my kids need? How do I see them in a way that I can call out greatness, that I can acknowledge who they are and really be able to walk alongside them so that they can be as successful in life as possible. And so in that, am I perfect? By no means. But each and every time that I see that I miss it, I try to process that internally, because I know that parenting is about leadership and how do I lead so that they can follow. And I miss it a lot, but also I get it right a lot simultaneously.
Right. So how long have you been married?
I've been married almost 20 years.
Okay, wonderful. That's quite a while. My wife and I have been married almost 35.
Congratulations.
So we have 4 adult children that are grown and out in the world, and we have 2 dogs and 2 cats now.
Full house.
If you ever think you're going to be an empty nester, think again. It'll never happen. And if it does happen, you need to stop the pets now while you're ahead.
Good to know. That's why I always love opportunities to get to be around other individuals so I can learn from them.
Yeah. Well, there's also a statement that says, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, it says, happy wife, happy life, right?
Yes. I've heard that many times.
Sometimes we guys who are leaders of our family, sometimes we think we can put our foot down and enforce rules that our brides don't agree with, and they veto it, right?
It's amazing how they have that pocket veto kind of power. You put it before them, and of course it just kind of goes in their pocket, and or they might not even look at it, and you learn really quickly about how much or how little power you really have.
Right. So we have we have this podcast. We also have a private Facebook parenting group, support group. We started out in 2015. We had like 10 members. At that time, I had 2 teenagers living at home, and I was desperately trying to stay out of prison. I told my wife, I said, let's see if there's other parents that are struggling with teenagers. And so we started the podcast, or not the podcast, we started the Facebook support group. And I think we're up to 1.3 thousand now. And so there's a lot of parents out there that are struggling with teenagers, young adults, adult children, et cetera, et cetera. And so in May of 2023, I thought I was kind of interested in getting into podcasting, and I was like, hey, let's do a podcast that will, like, provide the parents with something to listen to when they're driving around during the day, doing chores, taking the kids to school, or football or basketball or soccer or baseball or whatever it is that they're doing, and something that would help to support them, and they wouldn't have to always be looking at the computer screen to read. And so it's kind of taken off. It's taken on a life of itself, and
for
I
you.
joined Podmatch. Yeah, I joined Podmatch back in December of 2024, and it provides me with quality guests such as yourself. I was pretty much at the end of my knowledge with regards to doing solo episodes, and so Podmatch provides subject matter experts in different areas of parenting, nutrition, faith. I talked to a clinical psychologist last night, really
Nice.
smart guy.
Nice.
He talked about the act of emptying out our children and allowing our children to empty out or talk about those things that are stressful in their lives,
Mm.
and things that they suppress and push down. And as parents, we need to see them and allow them to be seen and allow them to talk about things that are bothering them. And then once they're able to do that, then they're able to listen to what we as parents have to say.
Well said. Absolutely. Yeah, that
Yeah.
validational part is massive.
And I thought that was very interesting is how he kind of broke it down in layman's terms so that I could understand it. And I'm going to have him on the podcast probably multiple times and just pick specific topics and stuff. But anyway, so much for him. And uh, let me let you talk for a few minutes.
Okay. Well, James, just from the standpoint of, I think one of the big things of kind of picking up right where I think y'all's conversation left off is the idea of how do we validate? And I think a lot of times what we do is we say, yeah, Brady, I validate what I agree with. Well, if we only validate our kids when we agree with them, then we're actually going to wound them significantly. Validation's so much more than agreement. It's about recognizing, I see you, I hear you, I want to understand you. So it's about recognition. And the dynamic of when a child understands that they're seen, that they understand it's safe, then biologically we lean into things that are loving and accepting, and we lean away biologically against things that are painful and rejecting. Well, Brady, I'm a dad or I'm a mom, and of course I'm not rejecting them. Well, not purposely, but again, how is that permeating through you, and how is it that your child is picking up on that? Are they leaning in naturally? Are they leaning away? Are they holding on to the very words and conversations they want to have because it's not safe to be able to communicate that? And so it really is amazing from the standpoint if we learn the just the naturalistic way of being able to validate. It's like a kid when they fall off their wagon or whatever it is, and they run up to the mom and dad with their elbow skin and they're pointing to their elbow and they're what are they wanting? They're wanting you to recognize their boo-boo. And in that moment, when you kiss it or whatever it may be, they run off and play. Why? Because they were seen. Now, if you looked at them and said, man, get out of here with that. Now they got two pains, and the second pain is worse than the first, which is dad missed it. Dad didn't see me in my time of pain. So when we can recognize not only our kids, but I think just people in general, then what that does is it allows people to understand I'm seen, and they can lean into the conversation regardless if it's a difficult one or a pleasant one. I think being able to have a great conversation is what we can lean into and be able to have as a result.
Right. So on many episodes, we've discussed parenting, and we've discussed the fact that parents don't get a manual with their children, right? Every child's different. One size doesn't fit all. And you can't put a round peg in a square hole or a square peg in a round hole, right? And so what you do with one child may not work for the other child. And if you got multiple children, you got a dynamic flowing relationships all around you, right? And so one of the things we talk about is that we don't have a manual, right? And so we have to I just lost my thought. We have to figure out what we're going to do, right? But anyway, what was I thinking? Lord, I don't even remember.
Well, I think if I could kind of jump in, I think the idea of just not having a manual. I remember one time early on when we were expecting our first, I got some great advice from my sister. She said, Brady, they don't know that you don't know what you're doing. And I said, oh, boy, that brings a lot of comfort. And then I followed up that statement. I said, well, about what age do they start discovering that I don't know what I'm doing? And then what do I do next? And she just smiled at me and walked off. And I'm like, that's not comforting. Again, thanks for the comforting standpoint, but what age can I start preparing of them that they're aware? And then what do I do next? And I think it's that idea. I've got 3 kiddos, of course, come from both myself and my wife, and they couldn't be more unique and different in any way possible. And so the way I parent my daughter, can't parent my boys the same way. What I do with my oldest son, I can't do with my youngest son. And it's from the standpoint of really knowing them in a very connectional way of what makes them tick and how can I meet them where they are so that they know that I am invested in them, that I see them, that I hear them, that I want to understand. There's that validational piece. And that's probably a word that probably will get interwoven within our conversation as we continue to go, because it is something that I feel is so passionate. I tell people all the time, I think that if you can get that one thing down, it can really pay dividends exponentially within your relationships.
Yeah, I just remembered what I was thinking about. I was thinking about how when we first start parenting, how do we parent? We parent the way we were raised, right?
Yes.
That's what's kind of hard baked into our psyche or our psychology, and every generation recognizes or remembers the pain of the negative things that happened to them when they were kids, right? And so when you have children, you're like, well, I'm not going to do that with my children because I remember how I hated it, right? And so I was raised by a military family, and they were perfectionists. They expected you to be seen but not heard. You were not to run around and have fun or disturb the adults, right? You only speak when spoken to. You don't interrupt the adults. And my dad was real heavy-handed, verbally and physically. And so anyway, when we had children, I recognized the fact that I needed to break that generational curse,
Good
and
for you.
I started listening to James Dobson.
Wow.
You know,
Yeah.
I graduated high school in 1980 and got married the first time right at around 86 or whatever. And so my wife and I, we got married in May of 1991. 1991? 1990? One of those years. 35 years ago.
There you go. There you go. Yes.
And I know it was May 12th.
You got the
No,
date
that's my
down.
wife's birthday. May 21st is when we got married, and because her birthday is on the 12th. And anyway, I started listening to James Dobson. We're both believers, and so I knew that there were, you know, people like James Dobson and Billy Graham and all those different Tony Evans and different pastors, you know, teachers. And so I tried to model my parenting uh, skills from what I learned from James Dobson. Uh, I mean, did I blow it from time to time? Sure. You know, there were times when I was caught by surprise and was stressed out or whatever that I reverted back to how my dad would have, you know, reacted. And of course, I wound up having to apologize later and going, you know, I didn't handle that situation very well, and I'm sorry for what I did or said, blah blah blah. And which is important. We have to be able to be transparent. We have to be able to understand the importance of saying I'm sorry when we screw up. You know, when we blow it, say you're sorry. You know, and let your children express to you how they felt about it. You know, and then of course, hopefully, y'all can move on from that. But anyway,
Absolutely. I think the idea of a lot of ways when I get to interact with individuals, they're like, what do you mean apologize to your kiddos? And I always like to say, you want your kiddos to be able to understand what healthy leadership looks like. And healthy leadership is understanding and being able to reflect on what they did, being able to acknowledge what they did, and then try to make amends for what they did. And again, if that's in an adult relationship, whether it's a boss employee, but we also want them to be able to learn that at a young age and be able to model it at a young age. And the only way that they're going to be able to learn that at a young age is by being able to see those that lead and that they observe mom and dad to be able to say, hey, how do I follow in their footsteps?
yeah, that's a relationship slash communications dynamic that follows you all through life, right? And you learn it at home, hopefully, you know, and you learn healthy communications, and you learn what a healthy relationship looks like between mom and dad, right? And mom and dad hopefully are modeling what a mom and dad are supposed to be like and how they're supposed to treat their children, right? And so anyway, yeah, that's these are foundational things that we have to learn early on as parents, and we have to have a measure of an emotional intelligence so that we can look within ourselves and go, well, why am I stressed out? Why am I angry? Why am I depressed? You know, I need to identify those things and understand how it's affecting my relationship with my wife or my husband, so that it doesn't bleed over into my relationship with my kids, right? So
Absolutely.
it's a whole family unit dynamic that goes round and round all the time. But anyway,
Absolutely.
we got pollen here in South Carolina, and it's just got my nose.
Yeah.
So I keep scratching my nose. Sorry.
No, you're fine. I think that you said something that when people come in, they always say, "I don't want to be like my dad. I don't want to be like my mom." And I always like to ask, "So how are you like your dad? How are you like your mom?"
Right.
Because
Right.
we take our cues early on, like what you were just talking about. I remember putting on my dad's boots and walking around the house. My kids will
Yeah.
put my shoes on and walk around the house. Why? Because they want to emulate. They want to imitate us. That's how they learn to walk through observation. They learn significantly through observation. They learn to talk by jabbering, by listening to us, by watching us. And
Right.
so much of those early formative years where the subconscious is actually being formulated is in those times where they're around mom and dad. And so much about what we do lays a foundation for them. And again, that can seem very pressurized. It doesn't have to be, especially for people of belief, because we understand that, guess what? We are leading as we follow the great leader. And the dynamic of that is, okay, are we going to mess up? Sure we are. But it's not if we mess up, but what do we do and how do we respond and how do we make it right when we do
Right.
mess up?
Right. So we have to be careful about saying, "Don't do as I do as I say." Right. We want them to model correct behavior, which means that we have to be modeling correct behavior in front of them. Like if you don't want your children to do drugs, smoke pot, drink beer, go out and party all night, well, don't do that in front of them. Don't come home at 5 o'clock in the evening, pop your feet up on the recliner, and pop open a beer or smoke dope in front of them. Right? Don't you be doing that. This is bad stuff. You can only do it at home with mom and dad. You don't do this out in the real world because you're going to wind up in jail or dead, and you're like, and that's a very extreme example, but there are subtle examples. There are subtle examples like mom and dad getting into an argument and cursing at one another, or getting angry and exhibiting anger and not exhibiting grace, not exhibiting forgiveness, not exhibiting the fruit of the spirit, kindness, joy, love, all of those qualities that as believers we aspire to incorporate into our lives, right, and incorporate into our relationship with our significant other, right?
Correct. Yes. Yes. Yeah. We've got a 14-year-old, so we're getting ready, at least wrapping our mind around the idea of training her how to drive. And the idea of saying, hey,
Boy.
don't exactly pray for me. The idea of don't text and drive. But if she's seen me text and drive, which of course I don't, then as a result, I mean, it's kind of that same philosophy. Hey, don't do as I say. Don't do as I do as I say kind of things. And again, that doesn't lay a
Right.
foundation. In the moment, she may register it, but what is she going to do when I'm not around? She's going to do. She's
And
going
what
to
does she learn? She learns by your actions.
absolutely.
That's
She
what she
learned.
remembers.
Yes, she learns that. Yes, she learns that there is a right answer. But as long as I know the right answer, it doesn't matter what I do as long as I give my dad the right answer. What is it that he's looking for? Hey, are you texting while you're driving? Of course not. Oh, then all of a sudden you get pulled over. You got a ticket where well, I don't know what the officer was thinking. I wasn't doing that. Well, what do you
Just
mean?
distracted driving. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's dangerous for the kiddo. It's dangerous for everybody. And the idea they follow our leading. And I believe that kiddos and children really want to follow good leadership.
Well, I think kids want stability, security, warmth, love, all of those things that all humans want.
Of course.
Husbands want that, wives want that, children want that, right? And so the same things that we as husband and wife want, we have to recognize that our children want the same things, and that they're looking to us to provide that. And guess what? If we don't provide that, if we're not a good role model to our children, I don't want to sound like I'm preaching here, but here we go.
Preach on.
If we don't provide that role model and instruction for our children to learn from, who else is going to teach it to them?
It's a good question.
The world.
Yeah.
The world's going to teach it to them. Social media is going to teach it to them. Cable TV is going to teach it to them. Their friends at the mall are going to teach it to them, right? If they don't feel loved and accepted and wanted and validated at home, they're going to get it in a gang, right? Or wherever. So that's why it's so critical that we think about those things.
Absolutely. Well said. And again, you're exactly right. Just because these legitimate needs that you're talking about, just because they're not being legitimized at home doesn't mean that they just go away. It means that they go get them expressed and met elsewhere. And again, like you're saying, whether it's in an appropriate relationship or inappropriate relationship, the dynamic of that, if you can reverse engineer that, what is it that they're really desiring and wanting? Love, just like everybody so desperately needs and wants themselves.
Right. I talked to I had somebody on the other day that was he's in prison ministry,
Wow.
and he works at a prison. I think he works there. Yeah, he works there, and he also has a prison ministry. Anyway, he was talking about all the young men that were in prison, incarcerated for breaking laws and doing bad things for all the wrong reasons. And he talked about all of those needs and how those young men were looking for validation, love, acceptance, and all those things that they never got, or they had a horrible role model, or the dad left the mom, when they were 6 years old,
Mm.
or what have you. So anyway, it was quite interesting. So let me ask some of your questions off your profile here to get back to
Okay.
you.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, how does understanding the mind body connection assist in parenting adult children?
Absolutely. The dynamic of going back to that validational piece as kiddos, as whether young, whether older, whether they're adults, the idea of knowing that guess what, I have a voice, I'm powerful, and I'm able to express that. Can you honor that, whether you agree with it and or not? Because again, I think that so much of the time when we experience things in life, we experience it from the first threshold, which is our emotional brain and or our limbic system. Just as when kids get hurt, they're acknowledging the pain immediately. And in that moment, the brain and the body is looking for the soul and or the mind to turn inward and actually acknowledge what's going on so that the mind and body can work in tandem. For those people of belief, we invite God into that. Now we express that pain and we start to release it. By doing that, now the ways that we communicate with one another look completely different, because if I don't, then that pain becomes repressed in me. If that pain becomes repressed in me, who do I have that pain associated with? If that's with an adult child, then as a result of that, guess what? I'm going to go to that kiddo because I didn't like what they did. I didn't like what they said. And I'm going to give them my thoughts. And by doing that, knowing that we feel before we think. And if I'm going to them, the first thing that they're picking up on is what's permeating off me. And because of that, they may not be able to hear anything. They're just looking at how do I defend and how do I protect myself, because boy, dad's on the war path and he's going to get me and I don't even know what's going on. And so by doing that, and then I leave the conversation thinking, boy, I really gave them everything. And boy, I feel better. But they probably didn't hear any of it. And if they did, they only heard very little. And as a result of that, now I feel better. They feel worse. And how does that impact the relationship as a result? Good, hard conversations, or just good conversations, are built upon the dynamic of two individuals leaning into one another. But yet now, because I didn't process what was in me, because of my adult child made a decision or is contemplating making a decision that has invoked fear in me, did I process that internally so that therefore I don't have this fear permeating out of me when I go talk to my child? Because if I do, what does that create in them? So again, the dynamic of that is validating what's in us, processing what's in us so that I can go to them, have a conversation and make it about them and not making it about me. And so the idea, the whole mind-body component is understanding, hey, what is it my child's doing? What is it that my child's not doing? What is it that my child's saying? What is it that my child's not saying? And what kind of emotional response is that inflicting in me? How do I allow the mind to turn inward and actually tell myself, what is that? Is that rejection? Is that abandonment? Is that fear? What is that? And allow the mind and body to really connect, because the brain and body need the mind to actually give it that voice so that the two can work in tandem, inviting true peace, inviting God into that, and starting to release. So now as a result of that, I can actually be in the right headspace. So when I go talk to my kiddo, I can make it about them. I can make it about the opportunity of saying, hey, so talk to me. You're wanting to move halfway across the world. What's that about? What does that give you? And so I can really be a guiding force to really help pray, to help guide, to help invoke some questions, to help them think differently and be in a place that's going to be for them. And what does that invoke? It in fact invokes them seeing me as, wow, dad's really for me. Absolutely. And allows them to lean in to a greater degree.
Right. So I was thinking that I had a pastor friend of mine that taught me something years ago. He told me about the psychology of need, and I was like, what is that? And he said the psychology of need is, and he kind of used an analogy. He's a pastor, we're the church members, we're the church together as one unit, one body. And what's our job? Our job is to love the community, to love one another, as Christ loved us, and to love the community around us, right? And to feed and clothe and house and provide whatever needs. It's like Paul said. He said, "Be." What did Paul say? He says, "Be whatever other people need you to be, or be the person that other people need you to be. That's not what he said. He said something else, blowing it there. Anyway, the point was that my pastor was saying that he explained the psychology of need, and he was talking about how the body of Christ, the members of the church, reach out to the community, whether it be food drives, clothing drives, witnessing to people on the street corner, whatever it might be, meeting them in the supermarket, football game, whatever. And he said the psychology of need is that you can preach at somebody, you can identify sin in their life, you can tell them what they need to do to fix their problems, but until you meet their basic needs, they're not going to be able to listen to you. They're not going to be able to receive, or they're not going to be able to be receptive to what you're telling them. Because why? Because they're hungry.
That's right.
Because they're homeless or unhoused. Unhoused is the new catchword today, I think. They're homeless, they're unhoused, they're hungry, they need clothing, they need shelter, whatever it might be. Maybe it's a mother that's just gone through a horrible divorce, or going through a horrible divorce, and she's got 3 kids she's raising by herself, right? And so what does that mean? It means that, and I'll try to tie this together into parenting, but as believers, when we are reaching out to the community around us, we have to be cognizant of the theology of need. What did I call it? Not the theology of need, but what did I
The
say?
psychology of need, I think, is what you called it.
Yeah, psychology of need. So when we're dealing with people, we have to meet them right where they're at.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
They're not where
absolutely.
we're at. We have to meet them where they are at. And we can't be judging them. We can't be preaching at them. We can't be throwing God's word at them. We can't be determining their eternal salvation or their eternal destination, right? That's not our job. It's our job to love them and to show them compassion and empathy and provide whatever needs that we're able to provide them, right? And that's the same thing with our kids.
Well said.
We need to find out where they're at, right? And it goes right along with the mind-body connection, right? The mind, body, and spirit, right? We have mental needs, we have physical needs. We need to feed our bodies and give it good nutrition, get it sleep, all of that stuff, self-care, right?
Yes.
And we have our emotional needs, and we have spiritual needs and mental needs, right? And so as we're dealing with our children, we need to remember that they are just like us. They're
That's
just
right.
small humans. They're mini me's, right? And they have all those needs too. And so while we are trying to be enforcing the parent-child relationship, we have to back off a little bit and go, hey, where exactly are they at? Because they made a bad decision, or they're headed down the wrong road, or hanging out with the wrong friends, or doing the wrong things. Why are they doing that? And so we have to make them feel comfortable and safe, give them a safe place to express, to empty themselves out, like the clinical psychologist told me yesterday. We need to let them empty themselves out and tell us what's going on in their hearts and spirits, so that then we can help them reflect, and make that mind-body connection that they desperately need.
Well said. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think by doing that, we're training them up in the way they should go. So as scripture says, so when they're old, they won't depart. Not if they depart, but when it's a dynamic of bringing them back to the opportunity of what they've been trained in. And I think the dynamic of that emptying out, I like that terminology. I like the imagery that it actually creates, because again, if we're
Right.
not allowing them to be emptied out, then the byproduct of that is repression. And so what is it that they're repressing? If it's not love, peace, patience, goodness, as Galatians 5 talks about, what is the original intent to be pushed down and or repressed, then pain's being pushed down. And pain causes a lot of issues.
I just remember what Paul said. He said, "Be all things to all people." Right?
Yes.
And what does that mean? It means that we need to meet people where they're at and be the person that they need us to be at that point in time. I believe. I think that's my interpretation.
Well, I think that's a good interpretation.
All right. So, second question: what role does spiritual healing play in addressing family conflicts?
Absolutely. I think the dynamic of, if I am wounded and I am going into the environment of interacting with my kiddos, and I become triggered based upon a lack of healing of the past, And in that moment, I get triggered, sight, smell, sound, whatever it may be. My child did something, didn't do it. Then all of a sudden, whatever was repressed, whatever wasn't healed comes up with the intensity and is expressed in and through me in that very moment. And again, the dynamics of what does that convey to my kiddos? Because what I've heard, what I've seen, and in the times where I haven't done it appropriately, again, I'd love to say that I've been a perfect dad. Unfortunately, that hasn't always been the case. I've learned, I've grown, and again, I try not to repeat the old patterns, but the dynamic of that is it really invokes a lack of safety. Wow. And the opportunity is the more that I can become healed, allowing the transformative power of Jesus to come in me and heal those areas, then the opportunity is if I see my child or hear my child do something, then as a result, it doesn't have the ability to trigger me in a similar way. So therefore, I can actually make whatever it is that's taking place about them. And so the dynamic of our interactions is making sure that they understand that, guess what? There's a lot of places in the world today that aren't safe. One of the places that they shouldn't have to contemplate, is it safe or not, is being near and around dad and mom. That should be one of the most comforting places of, oh my goodness, hey, this is going on. I need to get near mom and dad. And the same thing, I think, for us as children, this is going on. Hey, I need to get near dad. I need to pray. I need to get the Bible out. I need to see how he would instruct me in this very moment right here and now. I need to get near him. And so I think the dynamic of when we become further healed in our journey, it has a kind of a ripple effect, if you will. You throw a pebble in the water, guess what? It continues to permeate out and impacts all the people that you do life with, especially those that are the closest, like our kiddos.
Right. And so as people, as adults, we bring emotional garbage with us into relationships, right?
Absolutely.
And that's where emotional intelligence comes into play. Finding that healing and learning about how those traumas in our life have affected us, right? And sometimes that could you might need to go to a psychologist, psychiatrist, or family counseling, whatever you need to do, whatever mom and dad need to do to get healing over some of that emotional garbage. That will further equip them to be able to be a better role model, a better support person for their children.
Absolutely. Absolutely. People always ask, Brady, who should come into counseling? I'm like, are you breathing? Yes. Okay, good. You're a good candidate to go into counseling, kind of, because I think we all could use the opportunity of having somebody objectively hear what we're going through and give us a different mindset. Like you said, whether that's a psychiatrist, psychologist, pastor, whomever that may be.
Right. How can parents effectively communicate during moments of anger or misunderstanding?
Yeah, I think the dynamic of practicing active listening, that idea of being able to communicate it back. Hey, I heard this. Is that accurate? Now, again, that's in a little bit more calmer state of mind. I think the dynamic of a lot of what I like to do is walk along individuals, and really that first leg, I always like to talk about two legs. Because if we don't have two legs, we really can't move in the direction that we want to. We need that opportunity of them working in tandem. And that first leg really is awareness. How do I create awareness in the moments of when I am angry? Because the more that I'm aware of what's taking place in me, then I can step away and say, hey, you know what? Dad needs a moment. I need to go take a walk around. I need to clear my head. I need to get with God. I need to process this so that I'm able to come back. And the more that we practice self-awareness, the more that we have the ability, the more that we are strengthening that muscle, for a lack of a better way of communicating, so that in those moments when we are triggered, where we are in an intense state of mind, we can actually sit there and say, you know what, I need a moment. And people are like, Brady, can you actually get to a place like that? And I believe, just like in anything, the more that we put attention and focus there, and the more that we practice from a proactive standpoint. So in those moments, are we going to be perfect? Probably not. But if we get it right more times than not, then as a result of that, there's a benefit. And the times where we do miss it, we come back and apologize. But I think the dynamic of that is, how are we practicing awareness? One of the things I always like to communicate is 30 seconds for 30 days to sit down with a piece of paper and a pen, your Bible, and some worship music if you like, or your tablet if you're more techie, and to sit down and actually sit there and say, hey, what am I feeling? What am I thinking? What am I telling myself? What do I need and what do I want? Well, Brady, why? Because again, what we're doing is we're empowering the mind to actually turn inward and actually work with the brain and body. Because if it's not trained to do that, then the deflective measurement, as Freud would talk about, would be actually externally and create this self-defense mechanism as a result of that, because we need to be defended. And that's God's role. But how does that look like for us in those moments? And in those moments, if we're heated and that defense needs to take place, well, do we allow God to defend ourselves and submitting ourselves to him? But in those moments, can we have the wherewithal of what's going on inside of us so that I can sit there and say, you know what? Whether it's with my wife or my kiddos, hey, you know what? I need to take a walk. I need to go get time with God. I need to cool off, and let's come back and reconvene within this conversation.
Right. Time out. Let's take a time out. Let's let those severe emotions kind of bleed off a little bit, right?
Absolutely.
We can say bad things when we're upset.
Absolutely. It's kind of like, if you think about it like a boxing match, not physically, of course, but the idea of ding, 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 go to your corner, kind of things like that. Go to your corner, get you a little break, and then come back here, and then you get back to not boxing physically, but the idea of communicating your point so that people can be heard.
Cooler heads shall prevail.
Ooh, I like that.
And in what ways can seeking therapy become a pivotal step for family growth?
Absolutely, because I think that there's so much still stigma. I think COVID did wonders for the stigma of counseling or psychotherapy or psychology, kind of the field of mental health. I think that we've gone and we've taken tremendous steps. I think there's still some stigma. And so the dynamic of, I think, as a family comes together, what it shows is it doesn't have the ability to scapegoat anybody. A lot of times the dynamic of, hey, Brady, I want to bring my kiddo in to see you or work with one of your associates. How does that process look like? And I always say, hey, as mom and dad, I want you to come in and try to be in as many sessions as you possibly can. Because a lot of that is what we're doing is we're facilitating conversations, but two, we don't want the kiddo to feel like, oh my goodness, we're here because of me. It's my fault. I did something wrong or whatever that may be. And not only that, but it allows them to actually see, wow, mom and dad are actually learning as well. They're actually communicating, and we're doing this collectively. And so as a result of that, it's unbiased, it's objective. And as a result, it's allowing all parties to be able to have a conversation and allowing the kid's voice to be communicated and heard, and to be able to have somebody to be able to facilitate that. So the opportunity is everybody being able to take a step and growing, hopefully exponentially together and collectively moving forward, by all parties understanding that we're coming in this process, and we're going to grow.
Yeah. If families don't find a way to grow together like that and to work through family trauma, whatever that might be, whatever shape, form, or fashion that might come about, I like to watch stand-up comedy. And so many times these stand-up, what is her name? Tomlinson. What's her first name? Young lady. Tomlinson is her last name. Anyway.
Okay.
I want to say it like Tammy Tomlinson. It's not Tammy. It's something else. But I would say 25% of her comedy routine is to talk about some of the emotional garbage and the family trauma that she endured, right? And now as an adult, guess what? She's going to therapy, and not only is she going to therapy, but she's taking happy pills and different types of medicines that help her with not PTSD, but she's bipolar and got some other issues going on. And she talked about that openly on stage. And so, so she is an adult woman in an adult world with daddy issues, with religious family issues, and all of the above. And so now she's finding herself talking to a therapist, right? And so ultimately, that's good for her, right?
Absolutely.
Maybe sharing some of the details of her family trauma relating directly to her might be therapeutic for her, and it may be funny to the audience, right?
Sure.
We can learn to laugh, sort of thing. So it's kind of therapy for her along with everything else that she's doing. Ultimately, as parents, we don't want our kids to get to that point, right? We want to deal with we want the family to come together and be in therapy together and work through all the garbage, work through the trauma, so that when the child becomes an adult, they don't have to intense therapy and take drugs, right?
Correct.
We live in a broken world. We live in a broken world, and we're broken people, and so sometimes it works out that way. But
yeah,
I think mom and dad have a big role to make sure that doesn't happen.
Absolutely. And I think it can seem like the world's on their shoulders. And I think the opportunity is, so much about the energy that we give off is for our kids, and rightfully so. But the idea of how is it that as mom and dads that we're being replenished? Well, Brady, I'll do that as the kids grow and get out of the house. But again, if our kids learn observationally and we're teaching and training them as they become moms and dads, then what kind of reflection is that going to be, to the point where they're probably going to put themselves last as well? And of course, the idea that not all the time, but I remember I'd tell my wife, not well. Yes, I was going to go in a different direction. Hey, you cook breakfast. I want you to eat first. Well, but Brady, all the kids need to go. I understand, but guess what? They need to see that you're taking care of yourself, because if you don't have it within yourself, then you can't actually be able to express and really be able to pour out to our kids. And so much about that. I've got a little girl. And yeah, she wants to be a mom one day. And I love that idea. But part of that is the idea of, allowing them to go first and serving them. But guess what? Allowing them to see that it's okay for moms to take care of themselves and for dads to take care of themselves, because if they don't, do they really have the, again, energy to be able to pour out onto their kids and to be able to say, hey, dad, let's go throw the football around. And you're sitting there thinking like, I just want to sit on the couch and not do anything. And so how are we being poured into so that we're able to pour out?
That's why self-care is so important. And we talk about it so often on these podcast episodes that, because sometimes moms think me taking time out for myself is selfish, right? And moms carry a huge load when it comes to taking care of the children.
They do.
They're the ones that love them. They nurture them. Moms and dads love differently, right? Dads love their children, and I think their primary role is to prepare the children for the real world, right? And to equip them with the tools that they need to be successful in the workplace and all that stuff. And
yes.
And so moms are more of, they fortunately or unfortunately in our society, especially in our culture here in America, moms take on I think I would say they honestly take on a majority of the child raising. They're a majority leader when it comes to taking care of the kids, getting them out of bed, getting them dressed, making sure they're dressed, make sure they got lunches, lunch money, all taking them to all the different uh, events and stuff like that. That's not to say that dads don't do any of that, but I just think moms are the primary caretaker in the home. So moms, it's very important that moms, if you're listening, it's not selfish for you to take care of yourself. It's not selfish for you to take 10 minutes out of your day to go for a walk, or to listen to a podcast, or go to Starbucks and get a drink and listen to some music, or go for a walk in the park, or do whatever it is that you need to do to step away from the stressors in your life. And it's like you said, you can't pour out yourself into your kids or your family if you're empty and burned out.
Correct.
Right?
Correct. And I'm curious how many of us at some point in parenting have led from a place like that, because I know I have before, and it gets us to a place where we're probably going to be on edge a little bit more. We're probably going to be a little bit more shorter with our kids in the way that we respond to them. And again, the idea is if we're creating this culture, this atmosphere where we're wanting to train and lead our kids, the dynamic of that is making sure not only our kids have what they need, but making sure we do as well.
Right. So here's the last question, and it's a good one.
Okay, fantastic.
It's a one.
Hopefully I have an answer for you.
I'm sure you will. How do unresolved church wounds impact family relationships and parenting? I told you it's a good one.
Boy, it is. That is.
To unpack.
It really is. Okay. So, the church is communal in so many different ways. And it is where you hear slogans and taglines like, we're all about people, we're all about families. Kids are coming in, they're connecting with God, they're learning about who they are, all these different complexities. And so the idea of what the home is establishing, the church comes along and throws fuel on that fire in the best possible way on a Sunday or on a Wednesday evening or whatever that may be. But if there is the wounding that takes place in the church, then the dynamic of that is the individuals are going to be less likely to want to do anything that looks, sounds, or has anything to do with church life. And what does that do for the child as a result? They don't get that opportunity. They don't get the ability to be able to. Please.
So let's describe church wounds. What does that mean?
I think
in general terms.
Yeah. Any opportunity of being hurt by a church staff, church member, any opportunity where somebody from a congregational member has hurt, has said something, has done something, didn't do something, or didn't say something that created impact coming into the church, and there being greeters there and everybody's getting greeted, and I'll walk by and no one says anything. Well, Brady, that seems like you're kind of into yourself too much. But again, that can be it could be on the small end, or it could be on the big end, to the point where, I've heard of individuals, I've had friends, hey, Brady, I was in a really, really difficult time. I reached out to this pastoral care department because I really needed to talk to somebody. And weeks later, no one has ever gotten back to me. And the dynamic of what that can convey to that individual is that I must not care to that church. And so how this really creates impact is going back to that validational point. Am I seen, heard, and understood, or want to be understood by this church that proclaims who God is and all he says to be true, but yet it's not very expressive, or it's not expressive very well in the idea of what that means towards me. So going back to, like you're saying, very tangible way of expressing it or defining it is anytime that we get our toes stepped on inside the walls or outside the walls, that's connectional with the church to the point that it makes us not want to go anywhere near a church or be anywhere near churchgoers.
Yeah, and I always tell people that church is not full of perfect people. Church is like a hospital. We're all sick. We all need Jesus. We all need healing. We all need grace. We need empathy. We need forgiveness. We need direction. We need growth. We need structure. All of the things that you can get at church. And the church should be there to support the community. It's like some people have the idea that the church is literally there to provide a program and entertain them, right? And there are congregations and there are churches today, in five. So there are some mega churches that come to mind. I won't mention their names, but it's it's just like a huge production, right? And it's like people outside of the church, even some believers, I think they're drawn to these productions. They're drawn to this entertainment, and they think that that's what the church is all about, is meeting all of their needs.
Right.
When in fact, the church can meet some of those needs. It can provide some spiritual guidance and some spiritual healing, some instruction. But ultimately, the church is the body of Christ that is reaching out to the world and bringing that healing that they receive to broken people outside of the church, right? When
Absolutely.
we go to the gym, when we go to work, when we go to Starbucks, when we go play football or basketball or baseball, or wherever we are going into the world, we are Christ to those people. We may be the only Jesus. I'm preaching to him. Sorry.
Preach it. Come on.
We may be the only Jesus anybody sees, because they may not come to church because maybe they weren't raised in a faith-based home. Maybe their family got hurt at church, right? My parents weren't believers. My mother was a non-practicing Catholic, and I don't think my dad, up until he got sick, and I think he had a pastor come pray for him, and he went to church. He went to a Baptist church, I think, one time in his whole life. But I wasn't raised in a faith-filled family, right? I didn't become a Christian until I was 17 years old, and I really didn't get involved in organized religion, if you want to call it that, until I was an adult. That's why this question about how do unresolved church wounds impact family relationships in parenting. The unresolved church wounds that was caused inadvertently or advertently in church, that impacts the family relationships. Because
absolutely,
crap happens at church, right? And it festers and it causes wounds, it causes trauma. The family takes that back home with them. They don't deal with it. They repress it, and then it's like emotional garbage. That emotional garbage starts bubbling to the top, and it starts affecting family relationships, right?
Absolutely. And the dynamic of, I remember hearing a pastor once saying, if I have not had the opportunity of stepping on your toes, then you're not close enough. And I remember thinking, wow, for him to communicate that from the pulpit, I think it set a precedence, because again, the idea, it's like you're doing this dance with life, with the people. And the idea, some are good dancers, some like me are not good dancers, and you're going to get your toes stepped on. And so it's not if you get your toes on, but how do you respond when your toes get stepped on? And as a result, because when you think about when you're hurt, where for people of belief or people that are in searching on this journey of the idea of where do they typically go? You go into the church to receive assistance or whatever that may be. But the idea, when people feel like the church is the one that's caused the hurt, then as a result of that, people are at a loss of, where am I supposed to go now to get this resolved or to help? And the dynamic of that is, hurt people, as we've heard the idiom time and time again, hurt people hurt people. And so if I've been wounded by the church, I come home, and now as a result of that, I'm sitting around, I don't know that this is in me, or maybe I do, and all of a sudden my kid pokes, and what comes out of me is probably not going to be very pleasant because of that pain, that unresolved pain that's coming in from the church, that I went to the church hoping to get resolved, and they caused this pain, or at least my perspective is that they caused it. And now the unsuspecting bystander is my kiddos, and how that gets, they become the beneficiaries of this, and it doesn't help in the interaction and the intimacy of how we do life with one another.
So here's a funny story for me. We go to a non-denominational church called Coastal Community over in West Ashley here in Charleston.
Okay.
Been going there for 15 years or longer. Things happen in church, mundane, silly things like the music's too loud.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Some churches you go into, they're like Southern Baptist Convention or Methodist or Lutheran. Well, they sing from the hymnals, right? And they have Amazing Grace and all those wonderful hymns that we've been singing for decades, right? And then some churches, like our church, when you come to Coastal, they have progressive praise and worship, right? Hillsong, and you'll hear a lot of different types of song in that genre, right? And the music's really loud. Well, I'm 63, my wife's 65. We've been going there for 15 years, so I was in my 50s when I made this comment. It's just ridiculously loud. I mean, you can stand out on the street corner in front of the church and you can hear the music, right? It's like a concert. It's like going to the music farm downtown, which is where all the teenagers and young adults go. It's like 150 decibels at the lowest end, right?
Wow.
So my pastor said, if the music's too loud, you're too old, and it's not about you anyway. Well, on the surface, that kind of hurt my feelings.
Sure.
I was like, well, what do you mean it's not about me? What do you mean it's not too loud, or it's too loud because you're too old, right? Old people don't like loud music, right? And so what he was saying was that this environment that we've created, it's not about you.
Mm.
It's about attracting the community to come in. And most of the people that go to our church are in their 20s and 30s and 40s. And there are some older people, 50s, 60s, 70s. I don't think there's a lot of 70-year-olds there. But my wife and I are in our 60s, and so we're probably a subset of believers that are part of that family, right? But most of those people are younger people, right? And they appreciate loud music, right? They were raised around it, right? I was raised in the 80s, the good rock and roll music, right? And I remember when I graduated high school in 80, and so in the 70s, Led Zeppelin and AC/DC and all those rock and roll greats. It wasn't until I became a believer and started really listening to the lyrics that I realized how horrible they were.
Oh, sure.
When I was younger, I got into the beat. I got into the loud music, and I was jamming with it. And then I became a believer, and the Holy Spirit started changing, my thinking and my how I received the world around me. And I started listening to those lyrics, and I'm like, whoa, no, that's bad messaging altogether. But that's just a light-hearted example of how people get hurt in church. Well, I wanted to sit on the front row in that pew, and this 80-year-old dude wasn't about to move to save his life because he's been sitting at that pew for 50 years, right? And people in the church, they get offended by that kind of stuff. They get offended by where they're sitting, how the food tastes, what kind of music are we listening to, what kind of music are we singing, just anything that you can think of, anything that can affect a person within the four walls of that church. That's all about, that's kind of like the family dynamic, and you have to learn how to flesh that out and how to work your way through it. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Well said. Well said.
So I think we've had a wonderful conversation.
I have enjoyed it thoroughly.
Absolutely. Brady, I appreciate you being here. And to the listening audience, I'm going to say, here's a listener takeaway. Listeners may gain insightful strategies for enhancing relationships with their adult children by understanding emotional and spiritual dynamics, promoting more harmonious and supportive family environments, right? And thank you for being here, Brady. Thank you for listening, audience, for the privilege of your time. You can listen to the audio version of this podcast on Activate FM, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and Public Radio. A lot of people have iPhones or iPads, and they like to listen to podcasts on their Apple devices, so you'll find it on Apple Podcasts. You can watch the video episode on Rumble. It's rumble.com. It's a conservative version of YouTube. Our website's located at parentingadultchildren.org. That's parentingadultchildren.org. On the website, you can get my contact information, my email address. You can leave me a voicemail, and I'll respond to you. I'll engage with you. Upcoming show schedules will be in the blog. Just look in the blog and look for show schedules, and you'll see, the next. I advertise the current month and the next month. So just look. You want to know what's gonna happen or who's coming on, and you can just look at the show schedule. And there's a place at the top where you can click on review. And if you listen to any of the episodes, please leave a review. Engage with me and let me know how you liked it or didn't like it or whatever. New episodes release every Friday morning at 8 a.m. And with that, I'm going to say thank you for listening, Brady. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
And I'm going to say good evening.
Good evening.
Please tune in next week for another episode of our podcast on parenting adult children.